I found out my family went on vacation without me. From a photo, not a message, not a call, just a picture posted like I was supposed to already know. All of them were there. My parents, my brother, my aunt, even cousins who don't usually come to anything, standing together, smiling, like it was a full family trip. And for a second, I genuinely thought I had missed something. A message, a plan, something I forgot to reply to. So I checked. Group chats, texts, nothing. No invitation, no mention, no you should come, just absence. And then I looked closer at the photo, the house behind them, the balcony, the railing, the view. And that's when something shifted. Because I knew that house, not vaguely, not from memory. Exactly. It wasn't just somewhere they booked. It wasn't just some rental they found online. It was mine. And the part they didn't know yet was that I was the one who could decide exactly how long they were allowed to stay there. I've always been the one who figures things out. Not in a loud way. Not in a way anyone points to. Just quietly. The one who makes things work. Who plans ahead. Who doesn't wait for someone else to step in. It's not something I decided to be. It's just how things settled over time. Especially in my family. My parents are practical. They value stability, hard work, doing what needs to be done without making a big deal out of it. And I took that seriously. More seriously than anyone ever asked me to. I left home in my early 20s. Not because I needed distance, just because I had direction. A job opportunity in another city. Something that made sense for my life. So I went. Built everything from there. Slowly. Carefully. The way I do most things. I don't rush decisions. I don't rely on things working out by chance. I build them. Step by step. Until they're solid enough to stand on. That's how I approached my work. And eventually my finances. I didn't talk about it much with my family. Not intentionally. Just because it never came up in a way that mattered. They knew I was doing well. That I was stable. But not the details. Not the structure underneath it. And I didn't feel the need to explain it. Because my role in the family had never been about that. It was more background. Reliable. Present when needed. But not central. Group chats existed. Plans were made. And most of the time, I was included. But not always. There were smaller things I would hear about after. Dinners. Weekends. Last-minute plans that somehow happened without me. Not intentionally. At least, not obviously. Just the way things fell together. I told myself it made sense. I lived in a different city. I had my own life. It wasn't practical to include me in everything. And that was true. Mostly. So I didn't question it. I adjusted. Stayed connected in the ways that worked. Visited when I could. Called when it mattered. Maintained something steady. Even if it wasn't always balanced. A few years ago, I bought a property. Not a home for myself. Something else. A house in a coastal town a few hours away. It wasn't impulsive. Nothing I do is. I had been looking at options for a while. Running numbers. Considering long-term value. And when the opportunity came up, it made sense. The location was good. The structure was solid. And with a bit of work, it could become something really valuable. So I bought it. Quietly. Renovated it over time. Not all at once. Just piece by piece. When I had the time. When I was there. I didn't post about it. Didn't make it into something people needed to react to. It was mine. That was enough. Eventually, I started renting it out. Short stays. Holiday bookings. Managed through a service, so I didn't have to be there constantly. It ran smoothly. Predictably. Like everything else I built. My family knew about it. In a general way. That place you bought. That house near the coast. But not details. Not access. Not structure. Because again, it never came up in a way that required explaining. And I didn't offer more than was asked. Looking back now, that mattered more than I realized. Because the version of me they held on to was still the same one who left quietly, who managed her own life, who didn't complicate things, who didn't need to be considered in every plan. And I let that version exist because it made everything easier until it didn't. The week they went on that trip, I was working long days, a project that needed attention, nothing unusual, just focused. And nothing about that week suggested anything was happening without me. No messages, no mentions. No, we're thinking of going away. Just silence, which at the time didn't feel like anything at all, because silence had never meant exclusion before. Not clearly, not in a way I could point to. But then I saw that photo, and suddenly silence meant something very specific. Because this wasn't a last-minute dinner, or a small plan that didn't quite include me. This was a full trip, organized, planned, executed, without a single word to me. And that alone would have been enough. Enough to notice, enough to question. But it wasn't just that, because the more I looked at that image, the more I realized this wasn't just a trip I hadn't been invited to. It was something else entirely. I didn't react immediately, not when I first saw the photo. I just looked at it, then looked again. Because sometimes your brain needs a second to accept something that doesn't make sense at first. It was posted by my cousin. A simple caption. Finally all together. That word stayed with me. All. Because I wasn't there. And yet somehow that still counted as everyone. I zoomed in on the photos slowly, not searching for anything specific. Just noticing. My parents in the middle, my brother next to them, my aunt, 2 cousins, even people who don't usually show up unless it's planned properly. This wasn't spontaneous. This was organized, structured, something that had taken time, which meant something else had also happened. At some point, they had decided not to tell me. I scrolled through the rest of the photos. More angles, more moments, drinks on the balcony, dinner outside, morning light coming through the windows. And that's when I felt it properly. Not the exclusion. Not yet. Recognition. The balcony railing. The exact way the light hit the floor. The shape of the doors. I knew it. Not in a vague way. In a precise one. I opened another photo. Zoomed in further. The corner of the kitchen. The tiles. The handles I had chosen myself. That quiet detail no one else would notice. But I did. Because I had stood there, measured it, decided it. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because this wasn't just a house that looked like mine. It was mine. Exactly. I sat back in my chair slowly, phone still in my hand, and let that settle. Because now there were 2 things happening at once. They had gone on a family vacation without me. And they had chosen my property to do it, without telling me, without asking, without even mentioning it. I went back to the photos again, this time differently, not just looking, analyzing, trying to understand how this had actually happened. Because my property wasn't something you just arrived at. It was managed, booked, scheduled. There were systems in place, access codes, cleaning services. Everything structured, which meant someone had gone through a process. Someone had booked it, or accessed it, or arranged it, and none of that had included me. I opened my email, scrolled through recent bookings, because I track everything. Dates, names, confirmations. There was a booking for that week. I had seen it before, approved it automatically, like I always did. Nothing about it had stood out at the time, but now, I opened it again, looked at the name properly, and there it was. My aunt's name. Not hidden, not disguised. Just there. Clear. Normal. Like it wasn't something that needed explaining. I stared at it for a second, because that meant something very simple. They hadn't just used the house. They had booked it, like anyone else would. Except they weren't anyone else. They were my family. And they hadn't told me. Not before. Not during. Not even after they arrived. I went back to the group chat. Scrolled up. Days back. Weeks. Looking for anything I might have missed. A mention. A hint. Something small. There was nothing. Just normal conversation. Unrelated things. Updates. Messages that carried on like nothing had been planned at all. And that was the part that stayed with me. Not that they went, but how easily they kept me outside of it. Like I didn't need to know. Like I wouldn't notice. Or worse, like it didn't matter if I did. My phone buzzed. A new message. From my mom. Hope work isn't too busy. Just that. Nothing else. No mention of where she was. No, we're away. No explanation. Just normal. And I looked at that message for a long time, because it told me everything I needed to know. They didn't think this was something that needed to be acknowledged. Not even now. Not even after they were already there. And that was when it became clear. This wasn't an oversight. It was a decision. Not dramatic. Not discussed openly. Just quietly made. And carried out. Without me. So I sat there, phone in my hand, looking at the photos, looking at the booking, looking at the message from my mom. And I had a choice. I could say something immediately. Call. Confront. Ask why. Or I could do something else. Because they were already there. Already settled. Already comfortable. And they had no idea what I had just realized. Would you say something straight away, or would you wait and see how far it goes? I didn't call them. Not after that. Not even to ask a simple question. Because there was nothing simple about it anymore. Everything I needed to know was already there. Clear. Complete. Unavoidable. They were in my house. Staying there. Moving through it. Using it. Like it belonged to them. And at the same time, I wasn't even part of the trip. That combination settled in a very specific way. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just precise. I opened the booking again. Read it properly this time. Dates. Length of stay. Number of guests. Everything filled in like it was a normal reservation. Because on the system it was no notes. No message. Nothing to indicate that this wasn't just another guest. Which meant they had chosen to keep it that way. Deliberately. I checked the access logs next. Entry codes. Timestamps. Everything recorded automatically. They had arrived 2 days earlier. Mid-afternoon. Exactly when most guests did. Use the front door. Not the side. Not the spare key location. The main code. Generated through the system. Which meant my aunt had booked it properly. Paid for it. Gone through the same process anyone else would. Except she hadn't told me. None of them had. I leaned back in my chair slowly. Because now the structure of it was fully clear. They hadn't just used the house assuming it was family. They had gone around me. Used the system. Stayed within the rules. While still leaving me out of the reality of it. And somehow that felt worse. Not careless. Not thoughtless. Carefully arranged to exclude me. My phone buzzed again. A message this time in the family group chat. A photo. Dinner outside. Long table. Everyone sitting together. The caption. Perfect evening. No tag. No mention. No wish you were here. Just a moment shared. As if I was already included. As if seeing it was enough. I looked at it for a long time. Because this was the part that landed. Not the house. Not even the booking. The assumption. That I would see this. And accept it. That I would understand. Adjust. Move around it. Like I always had. I clicked on another photo. Zoomed in again. Details I knew by memory. The outdoor lights I had installed. The table I had chosen. The layout I had planned so it felt open but contained. All of it exactly how I left it. And now filled with people who hadn't thought to include me in the moment it was created for. I put my phone down. walked to the window, stood there for a minute, not because I didn't know what to do, because I wanted to be sure of it, because reacting the way I used to, quietly, internally, making space for it to make sense, would only keep everything exactly where it had always been. And this wasn't that kind of moment. This was something else. Something clearer. I went back to my desk, sat down, opened the system again. Not the booking this time. The controls, the access settings, everything that sat behind the surface of what guests saw, because that was the difference. They were inside the experience. I was holding the structure of it, and the structure hadn't been part of their plan. I could see everything. Entry codes, duration, permissions, even the cleaning schedule, already set for after they left. Like everything was expected to continue normally. Like I would just let it happen. I checked the calendar. They had 4 more days. 4 days of being there. Comfortable. Settled. Completely unaware that anything was wrong. And that was the part that stayed with me. Not what they had done, but how confident they were doing it. How natural it felt to them. To leave me out, while still standing inside something I had built. I picked up my phone again. Opened my mom's message. Still sitting there. Normal. Casual. Like nothing needed to be said. And I realized something quietly. They didn't think this was a problem. Not really. Because in their version of things, I was still included. Just not directly. Not in a way that required effort. Or consideration. Or a conversation. And that told me everything. Because once you understand how someone sees you, you understand exactly what they think they can do, without asking. I sat there for a long time after that. Not angry. Not even hurt in the way I expected. Just clear. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't something I needed to interpret. It was a pattern. One I had been part of for years. Just sharper now. More visible. And the difference this time was simple. I wasn't going to adjust around it. Not quietly. Not in a way that kept everything comfortable for everyone else. Because they were already there. Already settled. Already assuming everything would continue the way it always had. They just didn't know yet that this time I wasn't going to let it. I didn't do anything that night, even though I could have. Everything was already in my hands. The access, the system, the ability to change things instantly. But I've never been someone who reacts just because something is available. I wait, not out of hesitation, out of control, because timing matters more than action, and clarity matters more than speed. So I let them stay. One day, then another. I watched the photos come through. Not constantly, just enough. Dinner outside. Morning coffee on the balcony. The same balcony I had measured myself. The same table I had chosen because it fit perfectly in that space. They moved through it easily, naturally, like it belonged to them. And the more I watched, the clearer it became. No one was checking in. Not once. No message. No acknowledgement. No. Is this okay? Or even, thank you. Nothing that suggested they saw me in the situation at all. Just presence. Comfort. Assumption. And that told me everything. Because this wasn't forgetfulness. It was perspective. They didn't see me as part of the structure. Just adjacent to it. Someone who existed around things. Not someone who held them. I opened the system again that evening. Not because I needed to check anything. Just to look at it properly. To remind myself what was actually there. The back end. The controls. The structure that made everything function. Because that's the part people never think about. The part that doesn't show in photos. Ownership. Access. Authority. The quiet decisions that hold everything in place. And this time, that part was mine. I clicked into the booking. Read through it again. My aunt's name. Dates confirmed. Full payment processed. Everything done correctly. Technically. Which almost made it more deliberate. They hadn't stumbled into this. They had arranged it. Carefully. Just without me. I checked the access logs. Every entry recorded. Every time the door opened. They were using it like any other guest. Morning exits. Evening returns. Late night entries. Living inside something they believed was fully theirs for the time they were there. I leaned back slightly, hands resting on the desk, and I asked myself something simple. Not what they deserved, not what would make a point, just what would actually change this. Because a phone call wouldn't, a message wouldn't, that would turn it into a conversation. Something soft, something that could be explained away. Oh, we thought you knew. Oh, it wasn't a big deal. Oh, you're overthinking it. I didn't want that. I wanted something they couldn't reshape. Something that existed outside interpretation. So I decided on something simple. Not dramatic. Not aggressive. Just accurate. I picked up my phone. Called the property manager. He answered quickly. Professional. Efficient. Hi, I said. Kept my voice steady. I need to update access on the current booking. A pause. Everything all right? He asked. Yes, I said. It's just a system change, and that was enough. Because the system doesn't ask for context. It doesn't need emotion. It just responds to instruction. We went through it step by step. New access code. Activation time. Lock sync. Backup override. Clean. Precise. Controlled. When do you want it to switch? He asked. And that was the only question that actually mattered. I looked at the clock. Then at the most recent photo. Dinner again. Same table. Same ease. Same assumption. Tomorrow, I said. 7 in the evening. Right in the middle of it. Not when they were out. Not when it would be convenient. When they were there. Present. Settled. Because clarity only lands when it interrupts comfort. Got it, he said. I'll set it up. We ended the call. And I sat there for a moment, not thinking about consequences. Not imagining reactions. Just letting the decisions settle properly. Because this wasn't about catching them off guard. It was about showing them something they had never had to consider before. That what they were standing inside wasn't neutral, wasn't just available. It belonged to someone they had chosen to leave out. I didn't message anyone that night. Didn't change how I responded. Didn't hint at anything. I stayed exactly the same. Reacted to photos. Answered normally. Because nothing on the surface needed to shift. Not yet. The next day moved quietly. Work. Meetings. Small things that filled the time. But underneath all of it, there was something steady. Not anticipation. Not tension. Just awareness. Of what was coming. Of the moment where assumption would meet reality. At 6:45, I closed my laptop. Sat back in my chair. Phone on the desk beside me. And waited. Not impatiently. Not nervously. Just ready. Because in 15 minutes, they were going to reach for something they believed was theirs. And for the first time, it wasn't going to open. At 7, nothing happened. At least, not immediately. No message. No call. No sudden reaction. And that made sense. Because at that moment, they were still inside. Still comfortable. Still moving through the evening the way they had every night before. Dinner. Conversation. The slow rhythm of a trip that feels settled. So I waited, not watching the clock, just aware of it. Because change doesn't land until someone tries to move. At 7:23, the first log came through. Front door. Access attempt. Denied. I looked at the screen. Not surprised. Just registering it. Then another attempt. Same result. Denied. A few seconds later. Another. Longer this time. Like someone pressing the code. More carefully. Slower. Trying again. Denied. And then nothing. A pause. The kind that happens when confusion settles in before anything else. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Hands resting in my lap. Because I could see it now. Not physically. but clearly enough. Someone standing at the door, looking at the keypad, trying to understand why something that had worked every time before suddenly didn't. My phone lit up a minute later. My mom, calling. Of course it was her. I let it ring once, then answered.
"Hi," I said. Calm.
Even. There was noise on her end.
Wind.
Voices in the background.
"We can't get in," she said.
No greeting. No context. Just the problem. I know, I replied. There was a pause.
Short. Sharp.
What do you mean you know? She asked. Confusion now, starting to edge into something else. The access changed at 7, I said.
Still calm.
Still steady. Another pause. Longer this time.
What? She said.
And I could hear it. Not anger yet. Just disbelief. You're at the house, I said. Not a question. Just placing it. Yes, she said quickly. Of course we are, we booked it.
She stopped.
Mid-sentence. Because something had just connected. Not fully, but enough. You booked my property, I said. And I left it there. No emphasis. No explanation. Just the fact. Silence. Not empty. Heavy. Because now the structure had shifted.
Completely.
I didn't think, she started, then stopped again. And that was the part that mattered. Not what she was about to say, but what she couldn't finish. You didn't think to tell me, I said. Still calm. Still measured. We were going to, she said quickly. It didn't come up. Didn't come up. I almost smiled at that. Because something that requires booking, planning, coordinating multiple people, had somehow managed to happen without ever coming up. There are 4 days on that booking, I said. You're halfway through it. No accusation. Just placing the timeline where it belonged. Another silence. Longer now. Because the reality of it was settling in. Not emotionally. Structurally. They were outside. Locked out. Of a place they believed they had full access to. And the person who controlled that access was the one they hadn't included. What are we supposed to do? She asked finally. And that was the moment everything became completely clear. Not the situation. That was already clear. The expectation. Even now. Even standing outside. The question wasn't, how did we get this wrong? It was, what are you going to do about it for us? I let that sit for a second. Not to make a point. Just to understand it fully. Then I said, you can stay. Her breath caught slightly. Relief. Immediate. But the access stays under my control. I added. And next time you tell me before you book something that belongs to me. No raised voice. No anger. Just boundary. Clear. Placed exactly where it needed to be. There was movement on her end. Voices shifting. Someone asking what was happening. She covered the phone slightly. Then came back. We didn't mean anything by it, she said. And I believed that. That was never the issue. I know, I said. And that's the problem. Because intention doesn't change impact. And this wasn't about whether they meant to exclude me. It was about the fact that they had. Without noticing. Without questioning it. Without thinking it mattered. I gave them the new access code. Slowly. Made sure she wrote it down. This one works until checkout, I said. After that, it resets. Okay, she said. Quieter now. Different. Because something had shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. We ended the call shortly after that. No argument. No escalation. Just the correction. I set my phone down, sat back in my chair, and let it settle. Because the point had landed. Not through explanation. Not through confrontation. Through structure. Through something they couldn't talk their way around. And that mattered more than anything I could have said. They didn't message much after that. Not that night. Not the next morning. And I expected that. Because once something becomes that clear, people don't rush to fill the space. They sit in it. Try to understand where they are inside it now. I saw a few photos come through the group chat the next day, but they were different, subtly, less frequent, less certain. No captions like before. No perfect evening, just images, placed there without commentary. And that told me everything I needed to know, because the shift had already happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, just underneath, where things actually change. They stayed for the rest of the trip, used the house, followed the system, checked out on time, exactly the way any guest would. Except they weren't just guests, and now they knew that. My mom called the day after they got back. Not immediately, not while they were still there. After, when things had settled enough for her to step into it properly. "Hi," she said. Her voice was different, quieter, not uncertain, just aware. "Hi." There was a pause. Then, "We should have told you." Simple, direct. No explanation attached to it, and that mattered more than anything else she could have said. "I know," I replied, and I let that sit, because I wasn't waiting for something bigger, something polished. I just needed the truth placed where it belonged. "We didn't think it through," she added, and again, that was true, but not in the way she meant it, because they had thought it through, just not from my side. Not in a way that included me as part of the decision, only as something that existed around it. "I know," I said again, not dismissing it, just keeping it grounded. There was another pause. Then, "It felt normal," she said, and that was the most honest thing she had offered. Not an excuse, not a justification, just a reflection. Because for them it had been normal to plan something without me, to use something that was mine, to move through it without questioning whether I should be part of it. And that was the part that changed everything. Not the action, the assumption underneath it. "I'm not angry," I said, and I meant that. "I just see it clearly now." That landed differently. I could hear it in the silence that followed. Because clarity is harder to argue with than emotion. "You've always just handled things," she said, carefully, like she was trying to find the right way to say something she had never said before. "And we've probably relied on that more than we should have." That was as close as she would get. And for the first time, it was enough. Because it wasn't about getting everything perfectly right. It was about something shifting, even slightly. After that, things didn't change all at once. They never do. But the pattern shifted. Small things first. Messages that included me earlier. Plans mentioned before they happened. Not perfectly. Not every time. But more than before. And that was enough to notice. Enough to matter. My brother messaged me a week later. Out of nowhere. "Next time we go, you're coming." No explanation. No context. Just that. And I understood it. Not as a promise. Just as a recognition that something had been off. And now it couldn't be ignored. As for the house, nothing about it changed. It was still mine. Still running the way I built it. Still structured. Still steady. But I saw it differently now. Not just as an investment. As something that had revealed something I hadn't fully seen before. About where I stood. About how easily people move around what you provide if you never make it visible. I didn't bring it up again. Didn't revisit it. Because I didn't need to. The moment had already done what it needed to do. Sometimes I think about that first photo again. The one I saw without context. Without explanation. Just a moment I wasn't part of. And I realize now, that wasn't the moment everything changed. It was just the moment I finally saw it. Because once you see where you actually stand in something, you don't keep adjusting yourself to fit it. You decide where it fits in your life instead. If you've ever felt like you were part of something until you weren't, pay attention to that moment. It usually shows you more than people ever will. And if stories like this resonate with you, you can subscribe for more. There's another one waiting for you right here.